He was chewing something when he got into the truck. I thought it was beef jerky or something, but the sound was off. Too wet. And he didn't look at me when he sat down. He just stayed there with his head down, moving his mouth slowly. That's when I saw the stain on the corner of his jacket, red and fresh. His left hand was hidden under his backpack. I stopped in Spartanburg to refuel and grab a coffee. It must have been around 2:30 in the morning, and the gas station was empty, just me and another truck on the other side. I went to the cashier, paid, and came back. When I got near the pump, the guy was already there next to my truck with a canvas backpack on his back, a dark blue jacket, and a cap pulled forward. He said he needed to go to Columbia. He didn't ask, he just said it. His voice was a bit slurred, but I was tired, and I thought he was too. I said I could take him to exit 74. He agreed and got in on the passenger side. He threw his backpack on the floor, and before I could say anything, locked the door. He didn't ask if he could. He just locked it. I got back on the road and took Interstate 26 eastbound. He was quiet for the first 10 minutes, didn't even look out the window, just sat there hunched over with his hands in his lap. I asked his name, and it took him about 5 seconds to answer. He said it was Spencer. I almost laughed. I said seriously, me too. He didn't react, didn't smile, didn't comment at all, just turned his head to the side as if he were hearing something I wasn't. That's when the noise started, low and constant like chewing. I glanced sideways and his mouth was moving. I thought he had taken something out of his backpack, but his hands hadn't moved. They were still there, one on top of the other, motionless. The noise didn't stop, wet and irregular. I tried to ignore it and focused on the road, but the smell changed. It wasn't strong, but it was there, metallic and somewhat sweet. The backpack on the ground started to slide to the side, and when it fell, I saw the stain, dark and still damp, in the bottom corner of the tarp. I slowed down without realizing it. It wasn't a conscious decision, it was a reflex. My foot left the accelerator when I saw the stain spreading and the engine changed tone. He heard it, and stopped chewing immediately. The silence was worse than the noise. I felt him slowly turning his head, but I didn't look back, pretending to check the rearview mirror. He kept staring at me. I could feel it. Then he told me to relax, that it wasn't mine. Not mine what? I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. I tried to accelerate again and maintain a normal pace, but my throat was dry. He bent over again with his hands in his lap, but now I knew he knew I had seen it. And that changed everything. The cabin seemed smaller and the smell became stronger, metallic and hot. I looked at the dashboard. 17 miles to exit 74. 17 miles and I was going to get rid of him, that's all, just hold on until then. But he picked up his backpack from the floor, pulled it slowly and put it in his lap. The stain was on the outside, clearly visible now. He ran his hand over it as if he were brushing off dust. But he didn't clean anything, he just spread it around more. Then he opened the zipper about 5 centimeters, enough to slip his right hand inside. He started fiddling with something and I heard crumpled paper, plastic. Then he took out a small piece wrapped in a napkin, unwrapped it slowly, brought it to his mouth, and started chewing again. The noise returned, wet and constant. He turned to me and asked if I wanted a piece. I tried to make a joke, something like, "I'm on a diet, thanks." My voice came out shaky, but I tried. He didn't laugh, didn't react, just stared at me, leaning to the side with his head tilted like a dog trying to understand a strange noise. He chewed again, swallowed, and said I should try it, that his voice was serious, without irony, that it solved everything. Solved what? I didn't ask. I didn't want to continue the conversation, but he didn't stop. He dropped the wrapped piece on the dashboard right in front of me, and the smell wafted up immediately. Raw, old meat. I felt my stomach churn. He slowly lifted the sleeve of his left jacket and I saw it out of the corner of my eye. I tried not to look too closely, but I saw it. His forearm was covered in bites. Some healed, others still open, red, and swollen. There was a recent one right in the crease of his elbow, deep and still bleeding a little. He ran his finger over it as if checking the texture and said this one was fresh. And he smiled. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was something else. I gripped the steering wheel. There were 11 miles left to exit 74, 11 miles, that's all. He lowered his sleeve again, but didn't stop staring at me. He said it had been like this for 3 days since he left. Left where, he didn't say, just continued. At first he thought it would pass, but it doesn't, it only gets worse, then he realized. He said our bodies are like a pantry, that we just don't use them properly. He picked up the piece of the dashboard and unrolled it a little more. I saw skin, nails, and hair. My foot went back to the brake without me telling him to, and the truck slowed down. He noticed and told me to keep driving. I accelerated again, but my hands were sweaty. He reached into his backpack again and this time pulled out a folded piece of paper that looked like a prescription or hospital discharge paper. It was crumpled and stained. He opened it, looked at it, and laughed to himself. He said they thought medicine would solve it, called them idiots. He crumpled the paper, threw it on the ground, and turned to me completely, his whole body. He asked if I knew what solved it. I said it was control, that he decided what he ate, when, and how much. He raised his left hand and his fingers trembled. 2 of them had missing tips. He looked at his own hand as if it were the first time, and said he still had plenty left. He stopped talking and remained silent for a full minute. I counted 60 seconds without any sound other than the engine and the tires on the road. I thought he had given up, that he would stay quiet until we left. But then he leaned forward slowly, raised his left wrist to his mouth and bit down hard. I heard a sound like fabric tearing. He didn't scream, didn't groan, just closed his eyes and chewed. Blood trickled down his chin and dripped onto his backpack. He swallowed, opened his eyes and turned to me. His mouth was dirty and his teeth red. He said, "Your turn." I braked without thinking. I just braked. The truck skidded to the shoulder, kicking up dust, and he lurched forward, hitting his shoulder on the dashboard but not letting go of my wrist, continuing to hold it near his mouth. I unlocked the door on my side and tried to open it. He threw himself on top of me, and his weight pinned me against the seat. His right hand grabbed my shoulder, his left, the bloody one, went straight for my neck. I pushed and he bit the air near my ear. I felt his hot, metallic breath. I twisted my body and threw my elbow against the side of his head. He loosened his grip slightly, just enough for me to breathe. I tried to reach the door handle again, but he pulled my shirt and ripped the collar. I punched him in the side once, twice. He didn't react to the pain, just kept trying to pull me back. His fingers scratched my neck and I felt the skin tear open. Then he tilted his head and bit my shoulder through my shirt, piercing the fabric. I screamed and pushed him with everything I had. He hit the passenger door. The lock released. The door opened, and he fell out, rolling on the dirt floor. I stumbled out my door, my hand on my shoulder, blood trickling between my fingers. He got up too quickly for someone who had just fallen from a moving truck. His backpack was still inside the cab. He looked at me, then at the road. 3 seconds, that was all. Then he ran, not backward, forward into the bushes. He disappeared among the trees before I could scream anything. I stood there breathing, my shirt clinging to my shoulder, the engine still running and no cars passing by. I got back to the truck with shaky legs, but I got back. I grabbed my cell phone from the cup holder and called emergency services. The woman answered and asked what the problem was. I tried to explain, but it came out confused. I said I'd been attacked, that a hitchhiker had bitten me and run into the bushes. She asked me to repeat it, and I did. She asked where I was, and I looked at the dashboard. The odometer was showing 68 miles on Interstate 26. She said she was going to send a patrol car and an ambulance, and asked me to stay on the line. I said yes, but I didn't. I hung up, because I saw the backpack still there on the floor next to the passenger, stained and open. I didn't want to look, but I did. I pulled on the handle, put it on the seat, and unzipped it all the way. Inside were clothes, gray sweatpants and a white shirt, like a hospital uniform. I picked up the shirt and it had a name embroidered on the pocket, Kirkland State Psychiatric Hospital, and a number. Underneath his shirt was a white plastic identification bracelet. The name wasn't Spencer, it was another name. The admission date was 3 days ago and the status said high risk, do not release without escort. I dropped the bracelet and reached deeper. I felt aluminum foil, several wrapped pieces. I picked one up and weighed it in my hand. It was soft and irregular. I didn't open it, I threw it back, closed my backpack, and threw it on the ground again. The police arrived 12 minutes later, 2 cars and 4 officers. One of them asked what happened, I told him, showed him my shoulder, the torn shirt, and the blood. He called the paramedic, and while they were cleaning the bite, another officer got into the truck, took the backpack, opened it, and stared at it for about 10 seconds. He didn't say anything, just closed it, called his colleague, and they took the backpack to their car and put it in the trunk. One of them came back and asked if I had seen his face clearly. I said yes. He asked if I could give a description, and I said yes. He took the notepad and I started to describe him. Cap, blue jacket, approximate height and weight. When I finished, he put the notepad away and said they already knew who he was, that he had escaped the previous night and cut a nurse's wrist to get the key. He looked at my shoulder and said I was lucky. I went to the hospital and got 6 stitches. They gave me a rabies vaccine and antibiotics, did a blood test, and asked if I wanted to file a formal complaint. I said the police already had my information, but they insisted. I signed the paper and left 3 hours later. I went back to the truck, which was still on the shoulder, but my backpack wasn't there anymore. I called the dispatcher and told him I had a medical problem. He asked if I could continue the route, and I looked at my bandaged shoulder and felt the twinge. I said I could. He told me to go to Columbia, deliver the cargo, and return to base. I went. I kept driving, made the delivery in Columbia, and returned to base. The scar was crescent-shaped with 6 teeth marks. You can see it clearly when I take my shirt off. I never gave rides again, not at gas stations, not on the highway, not to anyone who seemed normal. But that's not what sticks in my head. It's the phrase, "Our body is like a pantry." I think about it every time I eat alone in the cabin, sandwich, burrito, anything. I grab the food, bring it to my mouth, and the phrase comes back. I stop eating for just a few seconds, look at what's in my hand, and go back. But I stop. I always stop. Before the next story, take a second to comment where you're listening from and what time it is there. That kind of engagement really helps the channel grow and helps YouTube recommend these stories to more people. The port's emergency lights were flashing incorrectly. It wasn't the normal pattern, and I know because I've loaded them there about 20 times. Always the same sequence. But this time it was something else. 3 short flashes, 3 long ones, and 3 short ones again. I stopped the truck at the gate entrance, still processing. SOS. Someone was signaling SOS with the port lights, and then I realized the lights weren't on. The port was closed, but they kept flashing. I was coming from Everett with a load of automotive parts to return to the port of Seattle. The scheduled arrival time was 1:15 a.m., but I left earlier, didn't encounter any traffic, and arrived 40 minutes ahead of schedule. I stopped at the south gate entrance, left the engine running, and grabbed my clipboard to check the paperwork. Bill of lading, entry ticket, and return receipt, all in order. I looked at the clock, 12:36 a.m., still time for a coffee. I grabbed the thermos from the back seat, and that's when I saw the lights. The administrative building was on the left side of the gate, the emergency lights flashing. 3 short beeps, pause, 3 long beeps, pause, 3 short beeps again. I froze instantly and recognized it immediately. SOS. I served 6 years in the Army before becoming a driver, and we learned basic Morse code in training. I never forgot it. 3 short beeps, 3 long beeps, and 3 short beeps. The universal distress signal. I dropped the thermos and looked around. The port was empty. No trucks, no forklifts, no employees, just me. And the lights kept flickering. I grabbed my cell phone and thought about calling port security, but I stopped. Because the emergency lights don't turn on by themselves, someone was controlling them. And if it was security signaling, why not use the radio? Why not open the gate and come to me? I put my cell phone away and grabbed the tactical flashlight from the glove compartment, a heavy mag light with 5D batteries. I opened the truck door and got out. The wind was coming from the sea, cold and smelling of diesel and salt. I pointed the flashlight at the administrative building, and the windows were dark, all of them except one on the 2nd floor. And the light inside was flashing along with the emergency lights synchronized. I stood there for about 30 seconds trying to decide. Go back to the truck and wait for the time, call the dispatcher and report it, or go through the gate and see what was happening. The lights stopped flashing, complete silence. 5 seconds, 10. Then they started again, but this time it was something else. It wasn't an SOS. It was a different sequence, faster and shorter. I tried to translate it from memory. Dot dash dot dash dash. R dash dash dash. O dot dash dot. I didn't finish, because I heard metal banging coming from behind my truck. I pointed the flashlight at the ground, looking for shadows, movement, anything. I saw tire tracks on the asphalt, recent and still glistening slightly, like when a tire heats up and leaves rubber on the ground. But they weren't mine. I had stopped straight ahead without maneuvering. These tracks came from behind, curving towards my truck and stopping. Someone had stopped nearby and hadn't moved. I slowly raised the flashlight and swept along the side of the truck, the mirrors, the fuel tank, and the rear wheels. And then I saw it. A silhouette crouched behind the right side double wheel, motionless. The flashlight hit it squarely, but it didn't move, didn't raise its hand to shield its eyes, didn't say anything, just stood there. I held the flashlight firmly and said, "Hey, get out of there." My voice came out louder than I intended and echoed in the empty port. The silhouette didn't answer, but it slowly moved its head upwards, and I saw its face. He was an unshaven man with a black wool hat and deep-set eyes. He was looking at me but didn't seem scared. He seemed to be waiting, like when you know someone is going to see you and you just wait for their reaction. I took a step back and asked what he was doing there. He didn't answer, just slowly raised his right hand and pointed, not at me, but upwards, to the top of my truck bed. I didn't look, I didn't take his flashlight. Pointing at what? He opened his mouth and his voice came out hoarse and low. "You're not alone." I turned the flashlight upwards and illuminated the top of the truck bed. Empty. Nothing. I turned back to him. "There's nothing there." He shook his head. "Yes, there is. You just haven't seen it yet." And then he stood up quickly, stepped out from behind the wheel and ran not far into the port. He went through the gate that was open, and I swore it had been closed before, and disappeared among the containers. I stood there breathing heavily with the flashlight still pointed at where he was. And then I heard it again. The sound of metal coming from the top of the truck bed. But this time it wasn't a bang, it was a scratch, slow and steady, like a fingernail on a steel plate. I stood there listening to the scratching sound, trying to pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. It wasn't from the roof. It was lower down, from the side. I grabbed my cell phone and turned on its flashlight as well. 2 light sources now. I walked around the truck, illuminating every corner, the wheels, the chassis, and the underside of the cargo box. Nothing was visible, but the sound wouldn't stop. Constant, metallic, and scraping. I got to the rear and pointed both flashlights at the space between the chassis and the axle. And I saw it. The brake air cable was loose, hanging, the end cut. It wasn't wear, it was a clean, recent cut. The rubber was still clear in the exposed area. I froze. Without the air cable, the brake doesn't lock properly. If I left there, I would discover this on the first downhill. I bent down and grabbed the end of the cable, trying to reconnect it, but it wouldn't fit. It had been cut too short, about 3 inches short of returning to the connector. I got up and the scratching had stopped. Total silence now. I looked at the gate, which was still open. The man in the hat had disappeared inside. I looked at the administrative building and the lights stopped flickering. Everything was dark. I picked up my cell phone and was about to call 911, but before dialing I heard an engine. Far away, coming from the road, high beams appearing on the curve. A black car with no license plate on the front slowed down when it got close to the port and passed slowly in front of me. I shone my flashlight on it. The glass was tinted, I couldn't see who was inside. The car stopped about 50 feet ahead and stayed there with the engine running and the headlights off now. I went back to the driver's side, opened the door, got in, and locked it from the inside. The car was still stopped. I dialed 911, and the woman answered. I started talking fast. "I'm at the Port of Seattle, South Gate. Someone cut the brake cable on my truck. There's a car stopped out front and..." She interrupted me and asked me to repeat the address. I did. She asked if I was in immediate danger, and I looked at the car. The driver's door opened, someone got out, tall, dark jacket, and started walking towards me. "Yes," I said, "send someone now." I saw the man turn around. He didn't come to my side. He went around the front of the truck and straight to the passenger side. I locked his door before he got there and heard the handle being pulled once, twice. Then he started banging on the window with his fist. The glass vibrated, but didn't break. I started the engine without thinking, just turned it on, engaged the gear, and stepped on the accelerator. The truck moved about 10 feet and stalled. Something held it from underneath. The engine strained, but the truck wouldn't budge. I felt the chassis being pulled back. I pressed harder and the tire started spinning in the air. Smoke rose. And then I heard it. Metal being dragged on the asphalt, loud and sharp, as if something was stuck to the axle being scraped on the ground. I released the accelerator and the truck stopped straining, but the noise continued coming from below, right under me. The man in the jacket stopped banging on the window, ducked down, and disappeared from my sight. I looked in the side mirror, nothing. I looked the other way, nothing. He was under the truck with whatever he was holding me down with. I grabbed the flashlight from the seat and pointed it at the ground through the window. I saw movement, shadows, 2 figures, not 1, 2. And then I heard a hoarse, muffled voice. "Get him out of here, get him out now." It wasn't the man in the jacket speaking. It was another voice coming from under the chassis, from someone hanging there. I froze. I couldn't process it. Someone was hanging onto my truck. Since when? Since Everett? Since before? I didn't know, but it was there. And the man in the jacket was trying to get him off or hold him. I didn't know which. I heard a short, choppy scream, then the sound of a body hitting the ground. The truck swayed and the weight disappeared. I felt the difference. I stepped on the gas again, and this time the truck moved. Without the brakes, I accelerated. 20 feet, 30. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the 2 of them on the ground. The man in the jacket was standing. The other was lying motionless. And then I saw the blue and red lights turning the corner. 3 police cars with sirens blaring. The police surrounded the man in the jacket with 4 guns pointed at him. He slowly raised his hands, said nothing, and didn't run. 2 officers handcuffed him and pressed him against the hood of the black car. I got out of the truck, my legs trembling, and a policeman came up to me. "Sir, are you all right?" I said yes, but pointed to the body on the ground about 20 feet behind my truck. The officer went over, bent down, checked his pulse, and called for backup on the radio. They turned the body over. It was the man in the beanie with blood on the side of his head and his eyes open. They covered him with a thermal tarp and the officer returned. "Did you know this man?" I nodded. He warned me and then ran away. The officer wrote it down, closed his notebook, and looked at me. "Do you know who you just found?" I said no. He turned the notebook over and showed me a photo stapled to the cover. The face of the man in the jacket, younger, without a beard. But it was him. Below the photo it said, "Wanted. Multiple homicides. Armed and dangerous." I'd seen him on the news 3 weeks ago, wanted in 5 states, suspected of killing truck drivers in rest areas. 7 confirmed victims. He hid under the vehicles, cut the brakes, waited for the truck to stop, and attacked. A sergeant approached. "We've been looking for him for 2 months. We received an anonymous call. Morse code on the emergency lights." I looked at the administrative building with the lights still off. Was it the man in the hat? The sergeant shook his head. "We don't know, but he saved your life." They cordoned off my truck and experts photographed the chassis, the severed cable, and the marks on the asphalt. They found tools underneath: pliers, a hunting knife, nylon rope, and duct tape. A police officer asked if I had checked the truck before leaving Everett. I said yes, a quick normal visual inspection. He wrote it down. "It probably got caught on the chassis while you were loading, and it was hanging there waiting for you to stop somewhere isolated. I drove 40 miles with it underneath without knowing. I went to the hospital as per protocol. They checked my blood pressure, heart rate, and asked questions about trauma. I signed the discharge papers and returned to the port 3 hours later. My truck was cleared with a temporary brake cable installed. The dispatcher called and asked if I could continue with the delivery. I looked at the chassis, at the empty space underneath. I could. He told me to go straight to the base afterward to rest. I said I would, but before starting the engine I got out again, grabbed the flashlight, and pointed it under the truck, illuminating every corner. Nothing. Empty. I climbed back up but stayed for about 5 seconds with my hand on the key, just looking in the rearview mirror, checking. I went back to driving normally, made the delivery, and returned to base. The tactical flashlight remained permanently on the dashboard, but that's not what changed. It's the ritual. Now, before getting into the truck, I tap the chassis 3 times with my boot. Every time. If there's anything there, it'll make a noise. It'll move. I wait 5 seconds, listen, and then I climb in. Every single time, without exception, no matter where I am. Whether it's a crowded gas station, a store parking lot, or an empty rest area, I knock 3 times and hear it. I always hear it. The box had my name on it, my address, and my handwriting. I recognized it immediately because I had filled out that form 3 days ago, but I hadn't sent anything. The box was cold, like thick styrofoam with dry ice inside. There was a note stuck to the lid saying, "Open it yourself." I opened it and saw the fingers first, 2 of them, cut at the base, the gold wedding ring still on the ring finger. I recognized the ring before processing the rest. I was stopped at the Love's gas station, exit 33 of Interstate 15 southbound from Las Vegas. A load of industrial parts to deliver to Boulder City, but the depot only opened at 9. It was 7:40. I had time. I stopped, turned off the engine, and went to the bathroom. The gas station was empty, just 2 more trucks on the other side and no cars. I went in, used the bathroom, washed my hands, and came out. 3 minutes, maybe 4. When I returned, the box was on the ground leaning against the driver's door. A medium-sized white cooler, the kind you buy at a camping store, lid sealed with clear tape. I stopped and looked around. Nobody. The 2 trucks were still there with their engines off, motionless. I approached and the box had a shipping label stuck to the side. Recipient Blake Morrison, address mine. Sender Blake Morrison, same address. My handwriting. I had filled out that form 3 days ago but hadn't sent anything. I picked up the box, heavy, about 15 pounds and freezing cold. I felt the cold through the styrofoam wall. There was condensation in the corners, dry ice or regular ice in large quantities. I put it on the passenger seat, got in, and locked the doors. There was a note stuck to the lid. White paper, block letters in black pen saying, "Open it yourself." That's all. No signature or explanation. I should have stopped there, taken the box inside the gas station and called someone. But I didn't. Because the label had my handwriting. The address was correct. And deep down I thought it was a mistake or a prank. I don't know. I ripped off the tape, slowly opened the lid, and the smell rose, metallic and cold. I saw ice first, packets of blue gel, and then I saw the fingers. 2, cleanly cut at the base, pale skin, fingernails painted light red, and a gold wedding ring on the left ring finger. I recognized the ring before processing the rest. It was my wife's. I was returning from North Las Vegas after delivering parts to a shop in Civic Center. Light load, payment on the spot, no hassle. I took US 95 southbound towards Henderson, normal traffic for a Tuesday around noon. I stopped at a traffic light near Bonanza Road in the right lane with the window slightly open because the air conditioning was broken again. There were about 3 cars in front and 2 more behind, routine. I was checking the mirror, wondering if I had time to stop at the shop before the next delivery, when a gray Civic stopped on my left. I didn't look properly at first, just noticed the movement. But then the Civic's passenger window opened quickly and an arm appeared without warning, throwing something through my window directly onto the passenger seat. The box hit the upholstery and stayed there. I turned my head towards the Civic, but the window was already rolling up. Dark tinted glass, I couldn't see the face. I tried to see the license plate, too dirty, blurry, almost on purpose. The traffic light turned green. The Civic accelerated, crossed 2 lanes, turned left at the first opportunity and disappeared. I stood there with a horn blaring behind me, and without thinking, I stepped on the gas. I drove about 10 blocks before pulling over. I stopped in a supermarket parking lot with the engine running and looked at the box. White styrofoam, transparent tape wrapped around it, no company logo, and no postage stamp. But it had a handwritten label with my full name and address in Henderson. And the handwriting, it was mine. I know my handwriting. Blue pen, cursive slanted to the right. The way I make the Blake letter B, that was my handwriting. But I hadn't filled out that label. I hadn't sent anything to myself. I picked up the box. Cold, uneven weight, like when you put ice on one side and the contents slide to the other. I shook it lightly and heard something moving inside, solid, not liquid. Then I saw the note, folded white paper taped to the lid. I opened it. 3 words. Open it yourself. Different handwriting from the printed label. No signature. I looked around the parking lot. No one paying attention to me. No one standing nearby. I turned to the back seat, empty. I placed the box on my lap, took a deep breath, and opened the lid. I quickly closed the box and threw it on the passenger side floor. My hands were trembling. I grabbed my cell phone and was about to dial the home number. But before I could touch the screen, the phone rang, vibrating in my hand. Private number. I froze. 3 rings. 4. I answered, but didn't say anything, just put the phone to my ear. Silence on the other end, but it wasn't a muted line. I could hear light, controlled breathing. Then a male voice, too calm. You opened it. Good. I couldn't answer. My throat was closed up. The voice continued. Your wife is fine for now. She'll stay fine if you do exactly what we tell you. I forced the words out. Who are you? What do you want? The voice didn't answer the question, just said I would receive a message in 5 minutes to read and follow the instructions, not to call the police, not to call anyone, that they were watching me. The call dropped. I stood there holding my phone, looking at the box on the floor. Her fingers were still inside. The wedding ring was still on her ring finger. I recognized that ring. I'd bought it 6 years ago. White gold with an engraving inside. B plus S08 bar 12. Blake and Sarah, wedding anniversary. I picked up the box again, opened it slowly, took out the ring and removed it from the cut finger, turned it over. The engraving was there. B plus S08 bar 12. It wasn't a replica. It was hers. My cell phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. I opened it. There was an address, a time, and instructions to pick up the shipment at the address, deliver it where they told me to, not to open it, not to ask questions. When it was finished, I would receive my wife back. If I refused, I would receive her in pieces. Below the message was a photo. Sarah was sitting in a chair with her hands tied behind her back, her mouth taped shut, her eyes open and frightened, but alive. Her left hand was visible, bandaged, 2 fingers missing. I hesitated, held my phone and looked at Sarah's picture again, her bandaged hand and frightened eyes. I thought about calling the police, dialing 911, explaining everything, showing them the box, the photo, and the messages. But then my phone vibrated again. Another message saying they knew I was thinking of calling the police, that I shouldn't, that they had someone infiltrated. I dropped the phone on the seat, took a deep breath, started the engine, and drove to the address. It took 22 minutes. Industrial area in South Henderson, old and somewhat abandoned warehouses. The address was the last one on the street, a gray iron gate half open and without a sign. I entered slowly, empty yard, parked near the warehouse entrance and got out. The door was ajar. I pushed it and it creaked. Inside, dark, smelling of mold and burnt oil, a pallet in the middle of the floor with 6 cardboard boxes stacked on top of each other. Brown industrial tape around it, no labels or markings. I weighed one by hand. Heavy, about 50 pounds. Sealed and well-made. Professional. I started loading them one by one, 15 minutes to put everything in the truck bed. When I finished, my cell phone vibrated. A new message saying good choice, now drive to Barstow, California. Address 2847 Nebo Street. Arrive before 10 p.m. Don't stop along the way and don't open the boxes. They would know if I opened them. I looked at the clock, 3:40 p.m. Barstow was about 2.5 hours away. There was time. But the phrase, they'll know, wouldn't leave my head. How would they know? I looked around the truck for cameras, a tracker, nothing visible. But they knew where I was. They knew what I was thinking. They knew when I opened the box. They were watching me. I got in the truck and took Interstate 15 westbound, past Jean, past Prim, empty road and clear sky with the sun beginning to set. I tried to think, who were they? What was in the boxes? Why me? But nothing made sense. I was a local delivery driver. Nothing special. No debt. Nothing that justified this. The only thing that made sense was that I had a truck, a clean license, a clean record. I was invisible, and they needed someone invisible. My cell phone vibrated again, and I almost ran off the road. I picked up the phone. Video call coming in. Private number. I answered. The call connected. Dark screen at first, then adjusted. I saw a room with concrete walls, no windows, and dim light coming from above. Sarah was in the center, sitting in the same chair as in the photo, her hands still tied and tape still over her mouth, but conscious, eyes open. Someone was behind her, a shadow. I couldn't see the face, only the silhouette. The voice that had called before spoke through the phone, calm and controlled, telling me to look at the screen, that she was seeing me too. I looked. Sarah saw me, and her eyes widened. She tried to speak, but the sound was muffled by the tape. She nodded slowly, as if agreeing, as if saying she was alive, that she was there. My throat tightened as I forced the words. Sarah, I'll get you out of there. I promise. The voice cut off, telling me not to promise what I couldn't control. The camera zoomed in on her face, and I saw tears streaming down her face. She blinked twice quickly. Our old code. It's okay, I'm fine. But it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. The voice continued, saying that if I stopped, if I deviated, if I opened a box, they would cut the transmission and I would never see her again. Understood? I said yes. The voice didn't seem satisfied and told me to speak louder. I shouted, Understood! The camera zoomed out and returned to the full frame, Sarah, the chair, and her silhouette behind her. The voice spoke again, saying I had 2 hours and 40 minutes to deliver to the address, leave the boxes, and get out. When they confirmed everything was all right, I would receive another call and then they would release her. I asked where. The voice didn't answer, only told me to drive. The call didn't drop. The screen stayed on. I put the phone in the dashboard holder and Sarah remained visible there. I was driving, she saw me, I looked at her, she looked back. The silhouette behind her moved, left the frame and returned holding something, a bottle of water. It removed the tape from Sarah's mouth, gave her water, she drank and coughed. The silhouette put the tape back on. Sarah closed her eyes, took a deep breath, opened them again, and looked at me. And I understood. She knew what I was doing, knew I was carrying something illegal, knew that after this nothing would be the same, and she knew I was going to do it anyway. I arrived in Barstow at 9:12 p.m. The address was a warehouse on the edge of town, gate open and light on inside. I parked, turned off the engine, and my phone screen still showed the empty room. Sarah wasn't there anymore. The camera pointed to the empty chair. I got out of the truck, and a man appeared at the warehouse door with a black mask covering half his face. He waved, pointed to the truck bed. I opened the back. He got in, checked the boxes, and counted 6. He tapped on the side of the truck twice, got out, went back to the warehouse and didn't say a word. I closed the truck bed, went back inside, and waited. 32 minutes later, the phone rang. A different voice, younger, saying she was at a Shell station, exit 184 off Interstate 15, alone, and that I could pick her up. The call dropped. I started the engine and accelerated. Exit 184 was about 15 minutes back to Las Vegas. I drove 20 miles over the speed limit and arrived in 12 minutes. I saw the gas station, pulled over to the side of the road, and saw Sarah sitting on the curb near the pumps. Her left hand was bandaged, her right hand clutching her elbow, trembling. Not from the cold, the desert was still hot. She was just trembling for no reason. I got out of the truck and walked slowly toward her. She lifted her head, saw me, didn't run or shout my name, just stood up slowly, her legs trembling. I opened my arms. She came and rested her head on my chest. She didn't cry, just breathed deeply and irregularly. I held her and felt her body trembling against mine. I asked if she was okay. She didn't answer, just shook her head. I don't know if it was yes or no. I took her to the truck, helped her up, and put her seatbelt on. She looked ahead, at the road, not at me. I drove back to Henderson in total silence. She didn't ask what I had delivered, I didn't tell her. But we both knew. I got home at 11:40, stopped in the garage, and turned off the engine. Sarah got out and went straight inside. I stayed in the truck, staring at the dashboard and my phone. The screen was still black. No messages, no calls. They had vanished as if they had never existed. But the cooler was still on the passenger side floor with her fingers inside. I picked up the cooler, took it to the garage, threw it in the trash, and didn't open it again. I moved on, and Sarah slowly recovered. She wears a different ring now, silver and unengraved. The gold ring stayed in the box, in the trash. I never told her I threw it away. But every time I look at her left hand, I see the 2 missing fingers and remember that I chose them. And I would do it again. They never contacted me again. No messages, no calls, and no boxes, as if it never happened. But it did. And I know what I carried with me. And I know what it does to me. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. And before you go, comment where you're listening from and what time it is there. It really helps the channel grow and helps YouTube push these videos to more listeners.